Earlier this week, one of the funniest exchanges on social media came about after the company known as IHOP changed out their P, which stood for pancakes, to a B. Initially, no one knew what the B stood for. International House of Breakfast? International House of Bacon? International House of Brunch complete with mimosas? Nope. The B stood for burgers, something IHOP has offered on its menu in the past, but when they finally revealed what the mystery was, they also decided to change their marketing to reflect that. And people were bittersweet about the change, including some of the other fast food social media accounts, with Wendy's even throwing shade on their Twitter account saying, "Can't wait to try a burger from the place that decided pancakes were too hard." So that gave me the idea for this week's episode. And by the way, the change from IHOP to IHOB is only temporary. I'm your host, Emily Prokop, and this is the story behind Hamburgers. But first, a quick message. As you know, the story behind will be turned into a book, which will hopefully be available in the fall of 2018. If you haven't yet, please visit thestorybehindbook.com to sign up to receive information and special offers. The book will feature chapters based on previous episodes, as well as all new extraordinary history of ordinary objects. And I can't wait to share it with you. I'll say right off the bat, there's some hot debate over the invention of the hamburger in the United States. And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to show a little bias in this episode. But before I get to New York versus Wisconsin versus Connecticut versus Texas versus Oklahoma, we first have to talk about the idea of the burger meat. Burger meat actually dates back to the 1100s, when Genghis Khan and his army were ruthlessly conquering and adding more territories to the Mongol Empire. His army spent much of their time on their horses and didn't have time to set up camp and set fires to cook their meals. They needed something to go, really. And in case I have to mention, this was before drive-thrus. The Golden Horde, as they were known, also needed something that could be eaten with one hand while riding. What they would do was put scrapings of meat from herds of goats, sheep, oxen, and horses that were brought with them and put them under their saddles as they rode, flattening and softening the meat, which was then eaten raw. Although from the friction and the warmth of the horse, it was at least warmed up a bit. Kublai Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson, and his army used the same method when they invaded Moscow, and Russians adopted this way of preparing meat, calling it steak tartare, Tartars being their name for Mongols. When German ships began trading with Russia, the steak tartare was brought over to, you probably guessed it, the port of Hamburg, although it wasn't called hamburger meat yet. It wasn't until the late 18th century that the ground steak recipe was brought to New York and sold to German sailors under the name steak cooked Hamburg style. Again, one of the reasons it was so popular with sailors was because it could be eaten standing up or on the go. By the way, Germans don't call it hamburger, but even though I may butcher, pun intended, pronunciation every now and then on the show, I won't even attempt the German words they use now. Germany is also a large part of hamburgers' history because of the way it's prepared. The original recipe usually called for meat sliced super thin or chopped with a meat mixer. Some recipes even instructed people to scrape the meat using a spoon to get tiny pieces off. In the 1800s, a German inventor by the name of Karl Dreiss came up with a device which whole meat could be placed in a reservoir on top, then using a hand cranking motion, a spiral blade would mince the meat up, and then a metal plate would push the ground meat out through small holes on the side. There were a few other patents for mechanical meat cutters from around the same time, including one to G.A. Kaufman of Virginia, but none got as much recognition as Dreiss's meat grinder. By the way, the same grinder was used for peanuts in the early 1900s to create peanut paste, which gained popularity and was the basis for peanut butter, which we talked about in the story behind peanut butter. This wasn't Dreiss's only invention. He was known for creating typewriter keys, a fire extinguisher, and a submarine with a periscope. But he's probably best known for his invention of one of the first bicycle prototypes that could be steered, and it didn't have pedals, so it was more like a hobby horse. Okay, if you listen to my other podcast about my weight loss journey called Hate to Wait, you know I love my carbs. So leave it to America to take something perfectly full of protein and add bread to it to make it amazing. But where in America that first took place is up for debate. and it's a pretty hot debate if you ask around. In 1895, two brothers, Frank and Charles Menches, were serving sandwiches at a county fair in, coincidentally, Hamburg, New York. When they ran out of pork, they decided to use ground beef instead. While the same year, at a county fair in Wisconsin, a similar thing happened to Charlie Nagreen, although he was making his sandwiches from actual meatballs so customers could eat them while they walked. Another claim comes from Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1891, when Oscar Bilby served ground beef inside his wife's homemade buns. And around the same time, burger meat was served on toast in Texas by Fletcher Davis. But here's the Connecticut claim, and if you didn't know, this is my home state, so I'll admit some bias on my part. Louis Lawson, a blacksmith from Denmark, came over to New Haven, Connecticut, and began selling lunch out of a food cart. In 1900, a customer came up and asked him to make something that could be eaten on the go. Louis, better known as Louis, put some beef trimmings between two pieces of toast. Their burgers are still served the same way and broiled in the same cast iron stove Louis used more than 100 years ago. Again, it's not a bun, but ask anyone from around the New Haven area and they'll tell you that Louis' lunch is a classic. Even the Library of Congress credits it as the maker of America's first hamburger. Oh, but a little tip if you ever go there. Remember in the movie Coyote Ugly when someone at the bar is pretty much tormented for ordering water? Well, that's pretty much what you'll get at Louis' lunch if you dare to order their burgers with ketchup. The hamburger made its way to the 1904 World's Fair, where it gained nationwide popularity. Sources were pretty all over the place when it came to who actually brought it to the World's Fair. Some cited Davis from Texas, and some said it was Lawson. Oh, and one more claim comes from White Castle, which, by the way, was the first fast food hamburger. White Castle credits Otto Kaus as the inventor in 1891. His recipe called for a fried egg in addition to the meat. And one more addition, Chicago also lays claim to being the first burger served on a bun in 1917 at Drexel's Pure Food. The world may never know who truly invented the burger, although I'm pretty sure my nutmegger status will be revoked if I don't say it was Louis' lunch. Information for this episode was sourced from History.com, BurgerWeb.com, SeriousEats.com, and more links which can be found in the show notes at thestorybehindpodcast.com. This week on Trivia Tuesday in the Story Behind Facebook group, Wesley pointed out that the capital of Central African Republic is Bangui, and its main river is the Ubangi. Bangui and Ubangi are anagrams. And Shannon posted that pine cones have genders. Male pine cones are bigger and not as woody, while female pine cones are smaller and hold the seeds. If you'd like to talk about trivia you pick up during the week and have it read on the show, join the Story Behind discussion group on Facebook. This episode is brought to you by the Story Behind executive producers who support the show through the Patreon page at patreon.com/thestorybehind. Thanks for listening.